Hey now, my name is Nick and today we're going to take a look at Valley of the Kings from AEG. This is another one of their small box card game line games, I said very eloquently, although this time it is not from a Japanese designer, so go figure. This is actually a deck building game, which is also pretty hard to believe considering, how few cards there are in this box, but it is. It's a deck building game for up to 4 players. And there's an ancient Egyptian theme here. The goal is that you're actually, you're a pharaoh who you're going to die someday. It's inevitable. But you're going to try to take as much loot as you can with you. Just like the tombs of these famous pharaohs that are just loaded up with treasure. That's what you're trying to do. Before you die, you're going to load up your tomb with as much treasure as you can. In gameplay terms, that means victory points. But there's some interesting little tweaks here that other deck builders don't have that sort of set this one apart. So let's go ahead and do a brief overview of the game, then we're going to come back and I'll tell you if it's different enough to make it a worthwhile purchase. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Valley of the Kings. This is a competitive deck building game for 2 to 4 players. And the theme of the game is that you are an ancient Egyptian pharaoh and you're trying to load up your tomb with as many goods as possible. I'm sorry, not goods, treasures, in order to be the most fabulously wealthy dead guy in Egypt. The way you're going to do that is through deck building. And how the game is going to end is as soon as the main deck of cards runs out and then this pyramid of cards is completely out, the game is going to be over, and you're going to add up however many points you have in your tomb. Each player is going to start off with one of these tomb cards, and your goal is to entomb the treasures that you find, which are most of the other cards that you start off with and that you acquire during the course of the game. I'm sorry, all the other cards. If you can entomb the most of those and get the most points out of them, you are going to be the winner. So every player is going to start off with a tomb and a set of 10 basic starter cards. So you'll draw 5 cards at the start of your turn, and then for the most part, standard deck building rules apply. You can play any or all of the cards that you want from your hand during your turn, and they can each be used for 1, 2, or 3 different things. Now, up in the top corner of the card, or near the top corner, you have this little gold symbol here, this little beetle symbol. That represents the amount of gold this card is going to give you as currency towards purchasing other cards. And in the top corner, you have the actual cost of the card. I can't exactly remember why the starter cards have that for them, but for the cards that are out here in the pyramid, which is essentially your buy pile, you're going to look at the number in the top corner, and that's how much gold you have to accumulate in order to buy the cards. So that's one thing you can use the cards for, is actually gaining wealth. The next thing you can use each card for is for its special ability. So you'll ignore the amount of gold that you get, ignore everything else, and just pay attention to the text. So for instance here, Box of Food says, sacrifice your card in your hand. Entomb a card with a lower cost. And remember I said that entomb is to put it underneath your tomb. It will not be in your deck anymore, but it will be points at the end of the game. Offering table, when an opponent's action will cause you to discard or sacrifice. Sacrifice makes you put a card into the boneyard, which is out of the game. Then you can reveal the offering table to prevent that. The Shabti lets you swap 2 cards in the pyramid or sacrifice a card in the pyramid. Now, why is that important? Well, this has a somewhat interesting and unique little lineup or starting lineup buy pile mechanic here, where you'll lay out these 6 cards. This is your pyramid. You can only buy cards that are at the base of the pyramid. And when you buy a card, or if it gets sacrificed for whatever reason, the pyramid crumbles. So if I was to buy or sacrifice this card here, this part of the pyramid would crumble down. If it was a card from the middle, then I would choose as the main player which of these 2 crumbles down into it. And the pyramid would continue to crumble down. And at the end of your turn, you would actually replace the cards from the pyramid, starting from the base up. If there's any empty slots, they get replaced from the main deck. Now, the way that the deck is set up is that your cards are considered level 1 cards. That's the number, the Roman numeral down in the corner. The first half of the deck is level 2 cards, and then the second half is level 3 cards. So the cards get they escalate and get better and better. Level 2s and level 3s are worth many more coins than your starter cards and have better abilities as well, and can be worth more points. The other thing about collecting cards is that while any card put into your entombed into your tomb could potentially give you points. Getting sets of cards is even better. Some of the cards just give you a static amount of points, like the cards that you start off with in your starting hand will just give you 1 victory point, which is what it says down at the bottom right here, kind of hard to see. But some other cards, let me find one of the examples of the purple cards. The purple cards will give you a static amount of points as well, and that's all well and good. But the most points you're going to get is by getting sets of cards. Now, for instance, the blue border cards are statues, and it'll tell you in parentheses how many unique statues there are in the game. There's multiple copies of each one, but the more unique statues you have in tombs that aren't copies, you get an exponential amount of points. It's actually a squared amount of points. So if you have 2 statues, that's going to get you 4 points. If you have 3 statues, that's going to get you 9 points, and so on. So the more and more of these you can get, the better, especially for higher quantities. So for instance, the sarcophagi, there's only 3 unique ones, so the most you can ever get from that is 9 points, but they are easy to get, so it's something to keep in mind. And there's a lot of other different cards and different special effects. So if you buy the canopic jar here, the Dwumatuf canopic jar, you can either use it for money on a future turn or force an opponent to discard a card. That's where the offering tablet comes into handy. The Statue of Sobek lets you reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, discard 1, entomb 1, put 1 on top of an opponent's discard pile. The sarcophagi, sacrifice a card, entomb a card from your hand. Now you might be wondering why some of these cards seem to give you, let you entomb things, but you might have to sacrifice things for it. Why would you want to do that? Well, one of the last type of action you can do on your turn with your cards is to entomb one of them, but you can only do that once per turn. Now at the beginning of the game, that doesn't seem like a big deal. In fact, in the first few turns, you may not want to entomb cards. Sure, you want to get rid of your starting cards at a certain point, but you still need to buy things, so it doesn't seem like that pressing of an issue. But when this deck starts to run out, and you see it getting down there, you're going to want to entomb cards because you're running out of time. Every card that's still in your deck at the end of the game is not going to be worth points for you. You have to entomb them. And since you can only get a free entomb without doing anything special once per turn, it might become crucial for you later rounds of the game to have cards that let you get more and more and more entombs to do it faster and faster, while still trying to keep cards in your deck that are going to give you those combos that are going to let you get more cards and keep your engine running. And that is essentially Valley of the Kings. It's typical deck building, but with some twists, trying to get points just by putting cards into your tomb, and doing that until the pyramid crumbles down to dust, until there's just nothing left out there. Then the game is going to end. Whoever has the most points is the winner. Component-wise, Valley of the Kings is fine. I mean, it's a small box game, and the cards are good quality, but I mean, there's not much there. It's really just a relatively small amount of cards. I'm not a fan of the artwork. The artwork is sort of that mostly realistic-looking Egyptian, both iconography and portraits of all these different types of treasures. And to me, that's not very interesting. But then again, I'm all about fantasy and science fiction. And for what it is, it's not like it's bad art. I just think it's kind of bland and boring. But okay, I kind of put it in the camp of Dominion. Like, Dominion artwork isn't bad, it's just bland. There's nothing exciting about it at all. So I would say that's probably the biggest knock that I have against Valley of the Kings, but it does work with its theme. Not that it's the most thematic game ever, but okay. Let's move on to the mechanics, and that's where this game shines. Now, I have a ton of deck builders. I mean, really, sometimes I think I keep certain deck builders just because I like the theme or the artwork or something about them, because there's probably 2 or 3 other deck builders I own or have played in the past that do the exact same thing mechanically. But Valley of the Kings is different. There are some things that it does that feel different. It feels like a deck builder, but also a racing game, which sounds weird, but I was thinking the whole time that I was playing that this was similar to Lost Cities. Not necessarily in the card play, because Lost Cities is not deck building, it's just about set collection and making sets of cards in front of you. But in both games, you are constantly looking at the deck of cards, the main deck, where everyone gets their cards from, and in Valley of Kings that fills up the pyramid, you're constantly looking at that to see how much time you have left, because at a certain point in this game, while it can feel like a traditional deck builder at first, you're building up currency, you're buying cards, you're buying better cards, and you're trying to flesh out your deck and get some combos going. At a certain point, you have got to start entombing those cards, because those are points. And if you don't do it, and if you don't do it fast enough, then you're going to lose out on a lot of points because you didn't leave yourself enough time to entomb. And so it is in Lost Cities as well. At a certain point, you can be building up cards, trying to keep a lot of cards from different colors and suits in hand. And then you're like, wait a minute, how many turns are there? Oh, I gotta start playing these cards. You know, you can't wait for that awesome card that long in Lost Cities. And that's the same way in Valley of the Kings. You can't wait that long to make these awesome combos, because ultimately what you're trying to do anyways is just get points. And the only way you're going to get points is by entombing. So all of those combos will help you for a little while, but at a certain point you just have to give it up, figure out how you're going to be most efficient about entombing cards. But if you do it too soon, then your opponent might be able to snatch some of those later tier cards that are worth a ton of points. Because of the way the deck is stacked with the level 2s on top of the level 3 cards, the really good stuff is going to come out at the end that could be worth a lot of points, but how long are you going to risk trying to get those cards? Because when those cards start to come out, you're getting into the final stages of the game. So I like that. I like that sort of impending doom in this game. That's not to say that other deck builders don't have similar mechanics. I mean, in games like Trains and Dominion, when a certain amount of stacks of cards run out, the game is going to end. So you can feel some sort of impending, I got to do something here. Or, you know, even in like the DC Comics deck builder, if the main deck runs out or the supervillain stack runs out. But in those games, there's not much you could do about that. You have to just be doing your best to work up combos and buy cards when you can, buy the best thing that's available to you. But, you know, it's you just have to do your best. It doesn't feel like there's this pressure to perform in a hasty manner that Valley of the Kings has. Some people are not going to like that, and I totally get it. And at the end of it all, it's still just a deck builder, so it's not like it's completely reinventing the wheel. But the fact that it is fast and that it is, you know, a little bit light, it's not too deep of a game, really makes me like it. I really, really dug this game. You know, the whole pyramid thing where it crumbles down, you can only buy the bottom cards. It's kind of, you know, it's kind of cheesy. It's not like it's this wonderful, awesome mechanic, but it's fun. I mean, it's different. It makes the game look different on the table. I like some of the different abilities that the cards have that sort of put some unique spins on things. It's, you know, it's a little more interactive than some deck builders in making your opponent discard, making your opponent sacrifice cards, having to give your opponent cards to entomb with certain ones. I like the set collection aspect, so it's not just that you're entombing cards, but entombing the right cards. Some of the best like effect cards in the game that are going to give you the most awesome effects and combos might only be worth a few points on their own, and so they're actually not that great to entomb, because you're trying, ideally what you're trying to do is get the sets of cards which are going to give you a exponential amount of points, but that can be tough. You might be in a competition with the other players, players at the table in order to get the same cards. So there is that little bit of tension as well. All in all, I'm shocked at the amount of game that is in this box. There's more here than you would suspect in this tiny little box. And AEG continued to impress me with this line of games. They're not all as simple as you would first think just from looking at them and looking at the amount of content and components that are with them. This is definitely one that was flying under my radar for a little bit. Didn't really know what to expect when I saw it on the just newly released list of cool stuff, but I am certainly glad that I picked it up. And for its price point, it's certainly worth it as far as I'm concerned. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and every way. Take care.